Well, good afternoon, everyone. If I could have your attention. My name is Steve Merksamer, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of PPIC. And on behalf of our board, many of our members are here today. Our board is here today. Welcome to this program featuring Antonio Villaraigosa in a conversation with PPIC's President, Mark Baldassarre. I've had the privilege of working with Mr. Villaraigosa when he was Speaker of the State Assembly many years ago, I should say, and some interaction with him when he was mayor of LA, also some time ago. And I recall, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Mayor, that you performed both jobs well, very challenging jobs. In fact, I believe you left the city of Los Angeles with a balanced budget, and which was no small feat, particularly in those very tough economic times. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here today. We appreciate it very much. This event is part of PPIC's 2017 Speaker Series on California's future. And I'd like to thank our generous sponsors of this series for their underwriting support. These organizations are listed on the screen right there on my left, and also on the back of your program that you all received, and they're also responsible for the free lunch that you had today, so let's give them a nice round of applause, all right? This series is also funded by the PPIC Donor Circle and the PPIC Corporate Circle, groups of individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. Funding from our sponsors and our donors make programs like this possible and ensure as well that they continue to remain free and open to the public in person and online. So before we begin, just a couple of very quick housekeeping items. As you know, PPIC is always trying to improve these programs, these events. So later today, all of you will receive an email with a short survey, and we ask that you please take a few moments to tell us what you think of the program, how we did, grade us. And finally, and this is very important, everyone please silence your cell phone. So now it's time to get this conversation started. I'd like to turn things over to our very able President Mark Baldassarre.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Welcome. Obviously, special welcome to Antonio Villaraigosa, who is our special guest here today. I just want to mention a few things about his illustrious career before we get started. Antonio Villaraigosa was in the legislature for 6 years, where he served as Speaker for some of those years. And he was on the LA City Council, and also as part of his distinguished career of public service, he was mayor of Los Angeles for 8 years. And last November, he decided to run for governor. And that's why we are here today, to talk about his announced candidacy. And we're doing this, if you look at the calendar like I do, 1 year before the June 2018 primary. So that may seem like a long ways off, but it's not. And this is the start of conversations that we hope to have with all the major candidates who are running for governor, because we at PPIC feel it's very important that we give you an opportunity, you the voters of California, an opportunity to hear about the leadership and vision that the candidates are going to provide. And my job is to really to facilitate a conversation for a while, and then ask you to ask questions of Antonio Villaraigosa. We had a chance to start this conversation 6 months ago, last December, at his home. And we had a very spirited and wide-ranging conversation about public policy issues. So we look forward to bringing that continuing that and bringing that to all of you today. We've only agreed on one question, and then we've agreed to see where it goes from there. The one question, which I will ask all the major candidates running for governor, is this. To you, what are the top 3 issues that you think are most important for the future of California?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark, for the invitation. It's great to be here with so many old friends. A number of your board members are people I have a great deal of respect for, I've worked with over the 25 years or so that I've been in public service. So it's great to be here with all of you here in San Francisco. And the top three, I think we got to start with the economy. The economy. And I say that because prior to announcing my candidacy, I went on a listening tour. I went up and down this state, 51 days over an 18-month period of time. And what I saw was two Californians. And what you understand when you see, or hear rather, that we're growing at a rate comparable to the nation, that we've created more jobs than Florida and Texas behind, that we've done it in some places. We're not growing together. And, you mentioned my public life, but I started out with the farm workers and the farm worker boycott at 15. I've dedicated my entire life to standing up for the notion that we've got to fight for the least among us. And what people don't realize about California is that although we have the 6th largest economy in the world, we also have one of the highest poverty rates. 3 of the top 5 cities with the highest poverty rate are in the Central Valley. San Bernardino is 9, LA is 14. 77 of the top 300 cities with the highest poverty rate are in our state. So the economy, what do we do to fix that economy? I think we got to improve our business climate. Most of the businesses in California are small businesses. We have a very Byzantine and bureaucratic regulatory framework that makes it difficult for them to grow those businesses. 2, education. I'm here today because there was a Civil Rights Act and a Voting Rights Act, but I'm here today because I got an education. And that's always been the path to the American dream. When I became mayor, we had a 44% graduation rate. By the time I left, it was 72, but it's not good enough. We doubled the number of schools that were 800 and above. We got to educate and train our kids. We've got to, when I say train, their job. You don't need a BS in engineering to be a coder, or a BS in biology to work in the health sciences. Yet we're not training people for jobs that are open today. And then finally, health and infrastructure. I know I didn't do 3. I can count, particularly to 41. But, look, there are a few priorities. And, I've always believed in universal health care. My first bill was a bill to expand Medicare to 200% above poverty for children. I'm the author of Healthy Families. We're looking at a $20 billion hit to the California budget if the House budget plan is passed. And we're going to have to make health care for all a priority and backfill that. And then finally, infrastructure. Look, we got a D- if you, according to the American Academy of Civil Engineers, in terms of infrastructure. And in the middle of a recession, I said, we've got to make those investments. And so I think the next governor is going to have to focus on building the infrastructure we need to grow our economy. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes.
Terrific. Okay, so 4 issues. Maybe let's explore each of them a little bit more. I'm tempted to ask you why you want to run for governor, though, having listed all those 4. So maybe we'll just get that question out of the way right now. And you've served in legislative and executive positions at the state level, at the local level. What made you decide to run for governor now?
Well, I think very clearly, I've said it for a while, I love public service. I believe in it. Yes, it's oftentimes challenging. Yes, many times, you know, you have people critical of the decisions you make, but I believe in our democracy. This is a great country. It's not perfect, but I think we need leadership right now. I'm not going to tell you everything you want to hear. I tell people, in fact, I'll ask all of you, how many of you are married? How many of you are happily married? Oh. How many of you agree with your spouse on everything? Well, why would you expect to agree with me on everything? And so, you know, the fact is that these are jobs that require leadership, making tough choices, identifying priorities, and being willing to say to people what they don't want to hear sometimes. I've done that for some time now. I didn't start out that way. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be loved. But over time, I realized it's better to be respected. And I think people respect someone who's willing to make the tough calls. And I'm willing to do it. Okay. That's why I'm running for governor.
Got it. So let's get to some of those tough issues that you brought up. Let's start with the first one, the economy. And we had a poll that came out last week, and 60% of Californians said that they felt that the gap between the rich and the poor was growing. Only 2% said that it was getting smaller. And 60% said that they felt the state government should do more, not just the government, but the state government should do more about income inequality in California. So what would be some examples of things that you would do to address the income inequality that's growing in California?
Well, we're here in the tech capital of the United States, San Francisco, San Jose, Silicon Valley. We're talking about a shared economy and a new economy. And I've said when speaking of the shared economy, I'm all for it. It's progress. It's here, and it's only going to be a bigger and bigger part of our lifestyle and our economy. But the shared economy's got to share. The fact of the matter is, if you were a taxi driver because you're working 80 hours a week, maybe making $80,000 and have health care and maybe a little pension, and now you're driving, you know, an Uber car or a Lyft, no health care, no pension. We've got to figure that out. Portability of benefits. We've got to rethink what people do in that shared economy so that they can live a dignified life, a life where they can maintain a family. Education and training. Look, I beat on that drum for 8 years as mayor. And I did because I understood that I was sitting in this opportunity, breaking another glass ceiling, because I could read and write. When I became mayor, we had a 44% graduation rate. I said, this city's not going to survive. This state is not going to survive if we're graduating about 80% of our kids, but only 13% of the majority of our kids, who are Latino and African American, are going to four-year colleges. In a world where the new economy is predicated on intellectual capital, what happens to us if the majority of our kids are not making it, if they're not participating in the new economy? So the next governor is going to have to challenge all of us to do a better job at educating and training those kids. And it starts, you know, with preschool and early child learning, all the way to college affordability. We've got to make it a priority. And we've got to fund our schools, but we've got to ask more of them as well. You know, I've fought my entire public life for more money for schools, but what I've said oftentimes to my friends is that people want to see us do more with the money we got. And we can't be afraid to connect accountability and responsibility with respect to how we spend our money. You know, what are we getting for it? Is the graduation rate going up? Is the reading and math rates, are the reading and math rates going up? Those are the questions. Are we rethinking what schools should look like, bringing technology, training our teachers, you know, bringing educational, instructional leaders into our classroom. I ran, when I challenged LA on our schools, I said, give me the worst schools, and by worst schools, they were great schools, great communities, but give me the lowest performing, most violent schools in my town. They were in Watts. They were on the east side where I grew up, my alma mater. It was downtown. The school district had a 44% graduation rate. We had a 36. Today we have an 81. I have a school in Bow Heights, a school that when we broke down my alma mater, which was the largest school west of the Mississippi, we founded a new school. It's Mendez. It now has a 94% graduation rate. My high school had a 75% dropout rate when I left in 1971. In 2005, it had a 65% dropout rate. It now has a 74% graduation rate. So these kids can learn. We got to set high expectations. As I said, we got to rethink what these schools look like, and then we got to fund them, because we're not funding our schools in the way that we should when you look at what we need to do to educate the people for the new economy and for a better future.
And would you add universal preschool to the list of things we should fund? So this is starting to get expensive now. So how do we pay for all these things?
Well, that's why I said we got to grow this economy. I'm a Democrat that believes, I mean, look, I've never talked to a business person in this state who said this is a good place to do business, and particularly a small business person. You know, we have one regulation layered upon layer, rarely looking to help businesses conform with those regulations. When I was mayor in the middle of a recession, people who wanted to build, wanted to invest in the city came to me and said, you know, it takes 12 different departments to do anything in LA, and 6 of those departments will tell you something different. When I heard that, I said, well, we ought to fix it. So you know what we did? We did a pilot program. We put all representatives of all 12 of those departments in one room. And we said, you know what your job is? If one of you have a different position than the other one, it's to figure it out. Not to have them figure it out, for you to figure it out. So we went from 12 departments to 1. And you see a building boom in that town. We made it free to open up a small business in the middle of a recession. And when people question why we would do that when we were on the brink of bankruptcy, I told them, I'll tell you why we'll do that. They're not coming here anyway. And we doubled the number of small businesses that were coming in. We tried to make it work, and I think that's something we need to do. I mentioned infrastructure, you know, and it's, look, I supported, you know, the recent effort to raise the gas tax, but I tell people we got to think out of the box. It's not just going to be more taxes. There are a number of things we could do with respect to infrastructure. Here's some examples. Putting the same kind of fund I got the federal government to do with Los Angeles, who was putting up $40 billion over a 30-year period of time. I said, you have high deficits and debt. You're not picking up the gas tax. Reward me. Reward us for putting up our own money. Give us low-cost loans and bond program to accelerate what we're doing. States got to do the same thing, because the state can't do all of the infrastructure. Said we had a D-. Cities and counties are going to have to help us, incentivize them. 2, we have the toughest regulatory framework in the nation. One of the things I did when I went to the federal government, I said, hey, why does the state have CEQA? Then you have NEPA, the National environmental kind of regulations. We do ours first, you do yours second. Why not do them concurrently? Save you time, save us money. We got to think, I tell people, if you can expedite CEQA to build a football stadium, why not affordable housing? And then 3, public-private partnerships. You go around the world, everybody, around the world. The government isn't the only one that builds infrastructure. The private sector partners oftentimes. We're going to have to think out of the box and do a lot more of that if we're going to address the infrastructure. So those are some of the kinds of things that we need to do. There are others, but I don't want to go on and on.
Let me try to get a little bit more understanding about where you are on infrastructure. I have a pretty clear vision at this point for Governor Brown. He's talked a lot about the high-speed rail, the Delta twin tunnels, the gasoline sales tax. So what are your priorities in infrastructure, and what are your thoughts about, beyond what you've already said, about how to pay for those priorities that
I just mentioned
yes.
how to pay for some of them, but I said we'd put a...
Would you keep everything that the governor has on his list now on your list?
If you want me to speak to first high-speed rail,
yeah.
I've supported it since 1998.
Okay.
I've not been for it, then been against it, then been for it again. I've been for it.
You wouldn't be referring to anyone on that? No. I guess not, right? No.
I think we know who we're referring to. I've been for it the entire time, but let me tell you why. And remember, I built 3 light rail lines and 1 busway in 8 years, more than any mayor in the United States of America during that period of time. So we thought out of the box. And I said to people, this isn't just about moving people, reducing congestion, improving our air quality and creating jobs. This is about reimagining the city. I said, this is about leveraging transportation for economic development. And the same is true for high-speed rail. If you just look at, first of all, 24 countries either have high-speed rail or are building it, okay? But second of all, if you just look at fare box recovery, how much it costs and what you get from, how much you pay for it and what you get back, that's not looking at high-speed rail in the way that we need to look at it. We need to leverage high-speed rail to connect these 2 big centers of the California economy, the Bay Area and the LA metropolitan area. We need to connect it to the Central Valley, which is a place of affordable housing, but not the kind of diversified economy that we need. We can leverage it for economic development in a way that will transform the Valley and make it connect these 2 power centers, that's the Bay Area and LA. That's the way you look at high-speed rail. So I'm for it. With respect to the twin tunnels, I've said, look, before we do, and by the way, they say $15 billion. I've heard $24 billion. I've heard size 35. But, whatever that amount is, I said, let's do the small things first. First of all, we know there's no support in the state for it right now, and I'll tell you why. The North's against it, and the South's for it. So let's build some trust. What are the small things we could do? We should all conserve more, everybody. It wasn't that difficult to conserve 20% more as we did over the last few years. We could actually do a lot more than that. Recycle. Somebody said, I was, that I doubled recycling. Yeah, from 1.5% to 3%. Orange County is recycling at 35%. Israel recycles at 80%. We got to recycle to a much greater degree, recapture stormwater runoff, clean up our aquifers. Australia has, it's a commodity, has water markets and water trading. We have some, but we're going to have to build on that. Use technology. I believe in all of the above. Use technology to look at things like desal. Desal is not the answer, of course, but it's one of the options that we have. And then I've said the following, and it's not gone well with some of my friends, but I've been real clear about it. The reason why there's no agreement on the tunnels, the reason why there's no agreement on so much of this, how we address this water crisis, is because there's no trust. In 1999, we agreed to 2 dams. Now, most of us who are environmentalists know that the best way to store water is underground. But we agreed to 2 dams. Those dams are Sykes and Temperance. We never come through on that agreement. There's no trust right now. So let's do the small things. And then, as we build trust, we look at riparian rights, pre-1914 water rights, then we look at all of the above, we move forward together. By the way, when I say together, a lot of people love to point fingers at ag, and I'm not one of them. And I'll tell you why. I was on MSNBC, The Water Wars, and I said, why do you call it the water wars? And he said, well, cities like you went to you reduced your water consumption by 23%. You're the #1 American city over 1 million in terms of water consumption. You went to 2 days watering a week and you got killed, Mayor. I said, yeah, I did. And he says, and cities use, they have 80% of the population, they drink 20% of the water. And ag in the rural areas have 20% of the population, they use 80% of the water. And I said, well, I didn't go to a really good high school and I'm not really good at math. But who's eating and drinking all those fruits and vegetables? Mm-hmm. The answer is we are. So maybe we ought to stop screaming and look in the mirror, do our own part, and build the kind of trust that we'll need before we start talking about tunnels.
Thank you. Well, water is complicated. That's one of the things I've learned from having a water policy center from our experts. Healthcare is complicated, I've heard. Somebody said that recently. Who was that? So we better come back to healthcare because the next governor, well, this governor and the next governor are going to have big issues to deal with healthcare. Medi-Cal is now the largest health insurer in the state. And there are still millions of people who don't have health care in California, even with that. And what we saw from the Republicans' bill that came out of the House, we don't know what will come out of the Senate, but it seems like things are moving in a direction where the Affordable Care Act is going to be repealed and replaced. How do you see this issue being resolved? What about single payer? And what about the sources of funding? What is a very important element of state government?
Well, I think we need real policy right now, not platitudes in politics. And unfortunately, in Washington, we're getting bad public policy and bad politics. And, look, we're looking at a $20 billion cut in health care. We went from 17% uninsured to about 6%. And you're right, there's still too many people without health care. I think priority number 1 is to address the delta between what we have and what we expect that they'll cut. The next governor is going to have to be thoughtful, is going to have to bring in all of the stakeholders just to save what we have. And so I've, as I said earlier, I support single payer philosophically, and I think it's ultimately where we're going. But, you just did a little poll on it, and you didn't have to tell me that, everybody's for it until they find out how much they got to pay for it. And, I'm not going to be one of those guys that just tell you what you want to hear. So I said that you're selling snake oil when you say that single payer is something that's going to happen anytime soon. We who believe in universal health care have to put our finger in the dike and do everything we can just to hold the line. Now, I do think when you talk to the experts, that there are a number of things that we could do better. prescription drug prices are soaring, and we're going to have to figure out how we bring down those costs. You know, public option. You said a lot of people on Medi-Cal. We should look at a way to buy into Medi-Cal, which public option would allow you to do. There are, you know, community clinics, prevention, you know, a policy that focuses to a much greater degree on prevention. Very, very important. But, you know, the notion that that this state can get federal waivers from an administration that clearly wants to eviscerate health care, not just Obamacare. They're going after, you know, the whole enchilada because, you know, although he said he wasn't going after entitlements, we know he is in this budget. We've got big challenges before us. So I believe health care is a right, not a privilege, but I think we need leaders who can prioritize and who understand that with a $180 billion budget, we have a few priorities. You mentioned universal preschool. You know, we've got to address the poverty, housing, homelessness, infrastructure. We've got to do it all. Mm-hmm. And nobody can do it all, so we're going to have to prioritize. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think about healthcare.
Let's go back to education for a moment. We talked about universal preschool, the importance of continuing to make improvements and bigger improvements in K through 12. The research at PPIC that some of my colleagues have been involved in points to the fact that our economy is going to be 1.1 million short of college-educated workers by the year 2025. We're just not producing.
And 1 million in the number of people with specialized skills. So it's 1 million. We're going to be 2 million down.
Thank you for knowing those numbers.
I do read your...
those numbers are
8
daunting.
Years from now.
Daunting, right? This is not that far off anymore when we talk about this. What are your ideas? What should the governor be doing in terms of leadership around higher education in California?
Well, I think we have to rethink it. You know, you look at all of our universities, and one thing is private universities, but I think there's, and I've heard Governor Brown speak to this, there's a lot of focus on capital projects and not enough on the instructional program and the academic programs. You know, I think there's not enough technology being used even in K through 12. You look at the Khan Academy and the things that they've been able to do. I think we got to put a lot more of those courses on the internet. And I want to empanel a group of, I just met with or spoke to California Futures. I know they have some specific proposals with respect to that. In fact, I'm supposed to get briefed. I think we're going to have to look at our community colleges and how we fund them. I've heard, again, another, you know, let's make it free for everybody. And what people don't realize, it's already free for poor people. And that's who it should be free for. But, you know, the other 40% who can afford it, my son, maybe yours, I don't believe that it should be free. We have to marshal those resources to, as an example, make sure that these young people and people are getting through the system, graduating from these community colleges with a skill set, a degree, transferring to a greater degree to four-year colleges than they are. You know, I don't have all the answers because I think it's
Are there some things we're doing right now that you'd like to see us do more when it comes to higher ed?
I think in community colleges, the fact that, you know, you can get waivers, and I guess from the board.
We can ask Eli Oakley. He's right here
Eli's
today.
here. Briefed me, by the way.
Good.
I think the fact that we're committed to making it affordable for the poor is critical. Mm-hmm. I tell people, I had certain needs that my son didn't have. Mm-hmm. My son had a mom and a dad, a mother with a college education, well, a master's in education, a teacher. Father was the most powerful guy in town. Middle-class people. I didn't grow up like that. Mm. I was the first, and I needed that kind of support. I went to a school with a dropout rate larger than the graduation rate, and I think we need to be committed to that. I think the UC system and the CSUs are still great systems, but I don't think we're contributing enough to them. Mm-hmm. And I think there are legitimate concerns on the part of the regents and the trustees and the community colleges and the CSUs that we micromanage and really aren't providing them with the resources that we need. So I think we're going to have to incrementally inch that up.
Thank you.
Or increase that.
So last week, the president said we're out of the Paris Accord. Our governor spoke, basically said, climate change is an existential crisis. He's in China today. He actually met with the president of China, yeah, and he is, he's taken a definite path. The legislature is basically, I think it's fair to say, talking about doubling down on a lot of the work that we've already done around AB 32 and SB 32, the previous legislation going to 100% renewables, extending cap and trade. I think the next governor is going to have some very important decisions to make around climate change and energy. And I think it's fair to say that, everybody in California is interested in where the next governor stands on the issue of climate change and energy. So first, I want to give you a chance to talk about that and what you do that's similar and different from what you're seeing and hearing today.
First of all, you got to acknowledge the leadership of Governor Brown, the Senate and the Assembly for AB 32, SB 32. In the 90s, I did the Carl Moyer Act, which was the largest effort to clean up the air in California since the Clean Air Act. And while I was mayor, we had the dirtiest public utility in the United States. We went from 3% to 20% renewable before the state asked us to, before AB 32. We signed agreements to get completely off of coal by 2025. We had the most far-reaching effort to clean up the port, and our port is the largest port in the United States of America, moves 44% of all the goods that enter the United States. The largest effort to clean up a port in the world, 90% reduction in truck emissions, pollution down as high as 76 for diesel particulates. We were absolutely committed to greening LA, and we have to be absolutely committed to greening California. Where would I be different? Folks, what we did differently, we didn't just set standards. We created green jobs. We became an epicenter of the clean tech community. We leveraged our universities to create technologies that could address climate change and pollution, by the way, not just carbon emissions. Pollution's important too. And we did that, partnering with our community colleges, our CSUs, the UCLA and SC and Caltech, to create green jobs. And I think the state has to do more of that. Look, I love when it's kind of like single payer. It's kind of like make everything free. Everybody, we can set a goal of 100% renewables, but anybody that knows anything about that knows we don't have the technology for that. You need battery power. It's not a base load, but wind and wind and solar are not base load powers, they're peak powers. So you need battery power to store it, to use it appropriately. Let's focus on setting big goals, but let's create jobs around it. Let's make the investments that we need to make that bring in the win-win. The Chamber of Commerce in California has kind of been oppositional to a lot of this. In LA, we brought them on board. First city to do feed-in tariff in the United States. We brought them on board. We worked together because we were focused not just on setting standards, but on creating jobs. And I think that's what the next governor has got to focus on. That's why I talk about those Davos Democrats. They get on their private planes and they, or commercial planes. They fly over the homes of people who've been left behind and they've never been in their living rooms. I grew up in those living rooms. I know that jobs are important to these people. I don't think they're deplorable because they want an economy to work for them. And, I respect the fact that, what we have to do in these jobs is to do a better job at, improving the quality of life and giving people a dignified life. And so jobs has to be connected to the sustainability and to climate change improvement, and pollution has to be connected. And if you don't understand the difference, carbon emissions doesn't deal with, are you getting respiratory problems because of SOx and NOx and diesel particulates. I was focused on that because I know who lives by those refineries, by those freeways. They're people who work hard, and they deserve us to focus on both climate change and carbon emissions, but also pollution.
One of the things that all Californians are going to be wondering about as they gear up towards going to the polls and choosing the next leader of the largest state in the U.S., the sixth largest economy, is what the approach is going to be towards Washington. We have a very different federal-state relationship today than we had a year ago, it's fair to say. We've touched upon this in different ways with climate change, with healthcare, even with education, with infrastructure. From your perspective, where are the areas where you would say, absolutely not, we're going to go our own way on this, as opposed to, let's try to find common ground and see where we can work together?
I didn't go to sleep on election night. I was transfixed, TV, like so many people in disbelief. Went down to work out, and around 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife came down at around 5, and she said to me, what's going on? What are you working out? And I said, I got to clear my head up. I just can't believe what happened. And I tweeted before the president and before Hillary that, essentially elections matter. We got to work with them where we can and fight them where we have to. I think the best way to fight them, him and his policies, is not to respond to every ignorant, angry tweet that comes out of there, because, that's all you'd be doing. I think the best way to fight him is to stand up for who we are. The best way to fight him is to mark our own path. Where would we draw our lines on the issue of what's made California great? Since the times of the gold rush, people came from every corner of the earth here in search of a better life, in search of fortune, in search of that dream. And let me say something to you about that dream. With all respect to those of you born in Alabama, have you ever heard of the Alabama dream? Or the Texas dream? Or the Wisconsin dream? There's only one dream you hear about, like the American dream. It's the California dream, and there's a reason for it. This is the place where people from other places in the United States that are not as open come to live a life that's free, to be judged on their talents. And so diversity's made our strength. That's our line. We're the epicenter of the foreign-born in this nation, the epicenter of the undocumented. You know, LA alone, 44% of LA's, foreign-born, I think 32% in California. We come from, 100 and some odd countries, and we have the largest populations of those countries here in this great state. And so we're going to stand up for our immigrants. We're going to stand up for our dreamers. And we're also going to stand up to the notion, let's fix the broken immigration system. We should fix it. We all agree on that. We're not massively deporting, 2.5 million people from the state. We're not going to do that here. And I think, issue of healthcare, I already mentioned, climate change, and, certainly the third area. But I think number one, we're standing up for the notion that we're the 6th largest economy in the world because people come from every corner of the earth here to work, to contribute to what's made us great and what will make us better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some questions?
I forgot we were going to do questions. The way this works.
Good clap. Some questions.
I was about to say, the way this works is if you don't ask me a question, I'll make eye contact with you and ask you one.
I'm jumping ahead of you then.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here. Eloy Oakley of the California Community Colleges.
Yeah.
So 1 out of every 4 community college student in the nation is a California community college student. And we're serving students in 113 communities up and down the state of California. So the impact is tremendous. Yet, we're struggling every day to ensure that the more than 70,000 students who are in our schools educating themselves, contributing to their communities, but are undocumented, either AB 540 or DACA eligible, are concerned about coming to class. What would you do as governor to reassure these students that they are not only an economic asset, but they're welcome here in California?
Well, I'll do what I've done my entire life. I've stood up for them. I tell people I didn't speak a lick of Spanish. I grew up in the 1950s. I never worked in the fields, but I stood up for the farm workers. At 19, I was, don't think this kind of rhetoric about the undocumented, and particularly Mexicans, started anytime recently. That's the first time we've seen a president in modern times talk like this, but we've seen this for a long time. I've said in Mexico and throughout the United States, that kind of rhetoric started right after the Mexican-American War. And, what I would say is, our community colleges, our public schools, our colleges are going to be places where these people are going to be welcomed, where they're going to be allowed to realize their talents. We're going to stand up for them, and that's one of the areas when I mentioned that we're going to mark a different path. I was part of the policies that over the years that you just spoke to. I've been for this my entire life, but I tell people I'd have been for it. You hear a lot, and I want you to think long and hard what it feels like to the 40% of the people who trace their ancestry to Mexico and Latin America, what it feels like to be called criminals and rapists. When, if you knew a little history, they are the most decorated ethnic group since World War II, fighting for freedom, fighting for America. Nobody has a monopoly on hopes and dreams or love for this country, and to hear people like him talk the way he does and them focus disproportionately on that community is unacceptable. So 1,000%, we're going to stand and say, not here. We're going to give these kids a shot, and they're going to pay us back mightily in the dividends for giving them that shot.
I'd like to get at least 2 more questions in. So does anybody have a question?
I cut my answer shorter.
No, it's okay. Question back here.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Spencer Hudson, and I am a member of Indivisible San Francisco.
Okay.
I'd like to follow up with you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up with you on your comments on the single-payer healthcare. As you know, the Senate has just passed SB 562, and last week, the University of Massachusetts Amherst published a economic analysis, a financial analysis of that bill. In that analysis, they reported that there are 15 million Californians who are either uninsured or underinsured. And that analysis suggested that we, the state, in total would save $40 to $50 billion a year by moving to a single-payer system as laid out in SB 562. So given the anticipated savings and given the increased coverage, what's not to like?
Mm-hmm. Okay. As I said, I'm for it philosophically. I've been for it. I actually did a bill in 1994, expanding Medicare to 200% above poverty for kids. I'm not convinced that we have a funding plan. In fact, I know we don't have a funding plan for it. So I think that we need to not allow ourselves to be distracted right now. Focus on the $20 billion. It's, you know, I used to be Speaker of the Assembly. I know what a $20 billion hole is like. It's astronomical, everybody. So we're going to have to deal with that first. Then we could have a conversation, and simultaneously or concurrently while we're doing that, we're going to have to look at how we can provide the same or greater level of care to the population of people whose health care would be cut if that $20 billion hole was not filled. And then we could have a conversation about how we transition. I mentioned public option. People could buy into Medi-Cal. You know, there are a number of things. We've got to look at soaring drug costs. But, you know, a 400, I mean, because you know as much as you do, you know we need waivers. Donald Trump is not going to give us those waivers. We'd have to use every bit of the $200 billion that we get now, cities, counties, and states. These are numbers that boggle the mind. It would require a tax increase of a size that we've never approved or passed ever in the state. So, you know, I want to work with Indivisible San Francisco and others, with, you know, about how we transition, because I do believe at some point, you know, in our future, we're going to realize, like so many countries around the world have, that that's probably the best and most efficient way to provide health care, but it's not today. And I know people want to hear that it is, but again, I think people saying that to you, they're snake oil. They're selling snake oil, and they're not really giving you the straight scoop. And I don't want to lie to you, and I think particularly right now in politics, people need to hear the truth, because when they don't, when you make a promise that you can't keep, they lose confidence in you and they become cynical. And that's what I feel about that.
Well, I made a promise to ask one more question, and so I want to keep that. Does anybody have a question on this side? Over here? And if we can keep it short, it's we got cookies and coffee waiting outside.
Never mind, I dropped my question.
You're good. Everybody's a comedian.
Everybody.
Fred Mendez with Union Bank. You did a great job when you were mayor of setting the foundation for an entrepreneurial sort of renaissance in Los Angeles, which was great for a bank like ours that really focused on small business. But we're starting to see the other edge of that. A lot of families are having to move out. They're getting priced out of the urban cores in San Diego, Los Angeles, the Bay Area. A lot of focus seems to be on the low income and the moderate income for affordable housing. And then obviously the people that can afford to live there. What's happening to the middle class? They seem to be the forgotten group there. How would you address that?
Actually, we haven't did. I did 20,000 units of housing in the middle of a recession. When I did the press conference, I think it was in 2009, that we were going to build 20,000 units of housing in Los Angeles, people looked at me as if I was smoking pot. And I stared them in the eye and I said, we're going to leverage our housing trust fund and we're going to look for other funding, nonprofit funding, to build that housing. So some of it was affordable. A lot of it was market rate. We did 2,500 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless. That's 3 times what they did in the 12 years before that. So what would I do as governor? I've already said, I think the governor is going to have to be a participant here. Affordability here in this city is an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. LA's right behind. The only place where housing isn't a big issue is the Central Valley and some of the Inland Empire, but everywhere else, it's a big challenge. So I think the state needs to step up. But again, innovative financing, incentivize cities and counties to put up their own money. With respect to market rate, and that's why I said innovative financing, but I also said if you can expedite CEQA to build a football stadium, why not for affordable housing? Why are we saying that you have to have all these parking spaces, in cities that are going to become more and more vertical, particularly along transportation corridors? So density bonuses for height that reduce the cost. Not everybody's going to live in a 3-bedroom home with a pool and a front yard. A lot of people are going to live in apartments, and if you live in Chicago or Boston or here or anywhere else, people live well that way. It's not for everybody, but they will live that way. So the state's going to participate, but I'm going to use a lot of tools in the toolbox. It's not going to just be, a bond program. It's not going to just be, some regulatory relief with respect to particularly housing and affordability. It's going to be things like, let's merge housing with transportation along transportation corridors. I did the first consolidated transit-oriented development planning districts in the United States. We got to do them all over the state. We leverage this stuff. So, and those are some of the things, and obviously others.
Final question. So,
one more?
From me.
Oh, from you.
So, in a sentence or two, can you tell us...
Sentence or two, gee.
That's the hard part, right? What kind of governor would you be?
A truth teller.
Okay. That's a sentence. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Special thanks, of course, to Antonio. Thank you, Steve, for being part of our program today. Thanks to all of our sponsors.
Nucci's in the house.
And please join us to continue the conversation outside with coffee and cookies. Thanks very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.